When stories are no longer When stories are no longer told and retold, the culture fades and the people are forgotten. We are not shy about remembering out loud our story. The National Film and Video Foundation, as an agency of the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, was created to ensure the equitable growth of South Africa's film and video industry. Our vision is embedded in an inclusive, diverse, and sustainable audiovisual ecosystem that tells South African stories to local and global audiences. We are the custodian of South Africa's film and video industry, committed to ensuring its equitable growth. The NFVF loves South African film and lets stories speak.
Good afternoon, everybody. Good morning, rather. Apologies. My name is Onge Dumeko, and I am the Head of Operations at the National Film and Video Foundation, also known as the NFVF. This morning, we will be taking you through our PESP4 program and all the exciting things we have to share about PSP4. So I'll be taking you through a presentation with regards to that. And then later on, we will have a Q&A session for any questions that you may have. During the course of today, you may have some questions that you may want to ask us. Please feel free to ask the questions that you have. Just be mindful of the fact that you will be sharing your name, your surname, and any other social media profile you may have. So just in terms of the PUPPY Act, just note that you, by including your question, you are giving us consent that we may utilize it. So thank you again for joining us. We hope that this session will be very informative for you and will give you just enough information for you to put through your application for the PSP funding. If there's a film, a documentary, anything that you would want to really see come to life, and you need just that additional amount of funding to really push you through to the finish line, this is definitely the type of session that would be useful to you and to other things that relate to film. So without further ado, I'm going to take you through the presentation. And then we will proceed with anything else during the course of the day. So just as an overview, PSP basically stands for the Presidential Employment Stimulus Program, and it's really come about as a result of what we've seen with the COVID-19 pandemic and how it's affected the industry at large, more especially this industry. I think a lot of you who are practitioners in the industry will have a deep appreciation for the extent to which you would have been affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and the lockdown implications, particularly on the timing to when productions could resume, how easy it would have been for you to have been employed on a production. If you are a film festival host, the extent to which you could implement any type of a film festival. If you had a training program, the extent to which you could really do that in person. So the PSP stimulus package has really been created from the presidency through the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture, and then to the entities such as the NFVF to really implement that grant funding. So that's really the purpose of it. And the NFVF has started with PSP1. We were there from the onset of PSP. We are in the process of still doing PSP3, particularly for Stream 1 projects, but we are still moving full steam ahead for PSP4, which has officially started from the 1st of April, 2023, as per our call that went out on the 6th of April for grants. So what's new with PSP? I think for those of you who are not familiar with PSP, I hope that I would have taken you through just an overview of what PSP is. It essentially is relief funding for the sector, particularly filmmaking, festival hosting, skills development and training. For those of you who are familiar with PSP, who may have applied in PSP 1 or PSP 3, we have changed some things just to make it a lot more efficient process. The whole point of PSP is to create as many jobs as possible. So it's very important for everyone to realize that the focus of it is really about job creation more than anything else. And in keeping with that, what we've had to do is make sure that we align that and keep on refining how we implement PSP. So we would have implemented PSP 1 and had a view of what went well and what didn't go so well. Same thing with PSP 3 for streams 2 and 3. We would have had a view of what went well and what didn't go so well. So in planning for PSP 4, we're now at a much better place to understand what works and what doesn't work. So the first thing is, because we have an increased budget for PSP 1, it was 140 million. For PSP 3, it was 152.9 million. For PSP 4, it's 179.3 million. And that increased budget then means that we have to increase the number of jobs that we create. So our target now is 11,000 jobs. But of that 11,000, 10,850 will come from grant funding. 150 of those jobs will be apportioned to an internship program, which will be administered through by the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. So in terms of the grant funding, our focus really as the NFF is the 10,850 jobs that we will create, right? Through the grant funding and the various projects that beneficiaries will apply for. Secondly, we are capping funding this year. I think PSP 1 and PSP 3, we didn't have capped funding because it's a special project. We wanted to give people the opportunity to apply for as much as they can. The reality is, in view of that, there's just been such an outcry for this type of funding. We have a specific amount to allocate and a specific job count. And even with PSP 3, when we had a budget of 152.3 million and a job target of 9,000 jobs, through the applications that were done, the request that or the demand that we got from the industry rather was 5 billion rand at the promise of 51,000 jobs. So you can tell that the extent to which the relief is required is not necessarily what we would realistically be able to offer. But we obviously have to make sure that we do everything that we can to make sure that as much funding goes to as many beneficiaries as is possible. So that's why we have included capped funding to make it a bit more clearer and give a lot more people an opportunity to apply for the funding, as opposed to saying that it's uncapped funding. Sometimes if you say it's uncapped funding, people get very excited and submit really big budgets. And when it comes to the line iteming of the budgets, it's something that they might not necessarily be able to justify easily. And then it obviously that compromises them in the process in terms of how much they eventually get approved for funding. Over and above that, we obviously need to make sure that we give as many people an opportunity to apply for funding. So if there's a project that's a really great application that's asking for a lot of money, even if it's asking for a lot of jobs, it obviously takes away that opportunity for other people to receive the funding. And then we also have stipends and guidelines, especially for Stream 2, skills development and training, just to make sure that if you are proposing, or if you will submit a proposal for skills development and training, you're not kind of thumb-sucking your way in terms of how much you will pay, especially if you're new to the process of applying, how much you will pay any of the individuals that will be part of your training program. We've given a guideline, which again will help you with your budgeting and your overall planning that you eventually submit for your application. And then we've also extended the timeline. So with PSP 1 and PSP 3, PSP 1, we allocated 3 months across the board for all of the 3 streams. Now we've ventilated that a bit. With PSP 3, Instead of giving stream 1 3 months, which was not enough time, we've now given stream 1 12 months, right? So we're continuing that. We did that in PSP 3. We're continuing that with PSP 4. We did the same thing with with streams 2 and 3. In PSP 1, it was 3 months for streams 2 and 3. We've extended, we kept that for PSP 3 to 3 months. But for now, for PSP 4, we've ventilated that a bit, and we've given streams 2 and 3 6 months in order to implement. It will help with things like the marketing of your programs, especially if it's film festivals, to really get positive crowds, positive numbers attending. With your stream 2, it would really also help you implement the full process or the full program of the training that you may want to create. So in a nutshell, I think what I've just explained is shown here in terms of the evolution of PSP and how we're really trying to move in a direction that creates a efficient as possible a process program implementation of this program, so that ultimately as many people are afforded the grant funding, and as many people then invariably are employed, right, through PSP. Yes, we may have a target of 11,000, but by no means do we have to meet that target on the dot. Ideally, the ideal situation is that give or take, we exceed it, right? So through the grant funding, while the number of interns for the specific program that DSEC will be handling is 150 on the dot, our grant funding, our 10,850 jobs, is obviously something that we can exceed, just to make sure that as many jobs are created. So ultimately, with PSP4, stream 1, which is production fund, which is the production stream, I'll go through the streams just now. Production, post-production, any projects that are able to be implementable within a 12-month period are given 12 months, right? As opposed to 3 months, we really just made sure that we give beneficiaries, practitioners enough time to implement their projects. Stream 2 is 6 months. So stream 2 is skills development and training programs. So if you have a training program, or if you have a training program that's attached to some type of a production, a mentorship program, you can be a fully accredited or a partially accredited training service provider. Instead of 3 months, you are now allocated 6 months in order to implement that. And then stream 3, as opposed to 3 months again, we've given that a bit more space, and 6 months again, in order to make sure that a stream 3 beneficiary can utilize the full amount of time of that period. And then you'll see then just the progression in the number of jobs and how we've grown incrementally. Also, even if you look at the amounts and how they've changed, I think it's worth noting that the job creation hasn't changed too drastically, only because we do recognize and appreciate the fact that, you know, we cannot in any way come across as though we are trying to implement a process where, you know, anyone who is employed under PSP will feel that whatever employment that they're given is really, you know, does not sufficiently match any employment that they would receive ordinarily. So we've tried to really not make the job target exceed anything that would be fair on anyone who would be employed through PSP. This is just a summary of the budget allocation for PSP with the grant funding. So ultimately, these are the 3 streams. For stream 1, it is 118 million for 7,850 jobs that we have to create. Stream 2, it is 21 million for 2,000 jobs that we have to create. And then stream 3, it's 12 million for 1,000 jobs that we have to create. There is an administrative cost that we are required to include to make sure that there is a smooth and above board implementation of this process. And then there are 150 interns that will be involved in the digitization of a lot of the materials in the arts and culture space, ultimately to lead to the 11,000 jobs. So when it comes to the grant funding, then the focus is purely that 10,850 jobs. So in terms of the projects, I'll start with Stream 1. So Stream 1 is the production open call. The projects that we will consider are fiction and non-fiction. So production animation series, production animation short films or pilots, feature films that are animation feature films, production short films, web series, feature films, production micro-budget films, made for TV, post-production feature films, and TV pilots. Non-fiction 2 to 3 part documentaries, feature documentaries, short films that are documentaries, production web series that are docus, post-production docu feature films, and docus that are or non-fiction TV pilots. The requirement is that whatever format you are applying for, you can create a minimum of 10 jobs within a period of 12 months or a year. So those projects need to be implementable between the 1st of October 2023 and the 31st of October 2024, which means that from now, when the call is out, the call went out on the 6th of April, it closes on the 28th of April. From now, when the call is out, throughout the processes that we will conduct as the NFDF with the advisory panel members who will review the projects, our council who will approve them, the contracting phase, the payment of the 90% of the first tranche payment. We pay beneficiaries in 2 tranches, 90 and 10%. So the 90% payment, the contracting, that entire process would have been completed by the time you start to implement your program, the time you have to implement your Stream 1 production program on the 1st of October. So we're making it clear here to avoid a situation where someone gets approved for funding and when they're given the exact time frame for whatever 3, 4, 5, 6 months of it, they are, they won't necessarily be able to do it, or they'll be held up in something else. It's better just for us to manage expectations and to make it very clear that you would be required to implement between the 1st of October 2023 and the 31st of October 2024. Once you've complete implementation on the 31st of October 2024, you submit all the relevant documentation that's required to the NFF and you are paid your balance payment of 10%. The projects, though, that we are not considering are projects that are in development, right? So these are projects that ultimately, because they, comparatively speaking, do not necessarily give us the opportunity to create as many jobs as production projects do. So you must remember that, PSP really is focused on job creation. So we really had to make a tough call here, which we did in PSP3 as well, to really focus on jobs that are production ready, that are ready to go on set and go into the production process, go into the post-production process. The other thing we are not going to consider are complete TV series and TV formats, purely because of the cost of those. It really results in the type of applications where the budget request is exceedingly high for what we could typically manage through this process in such a way where we could allocate the funding to as many practitioners as possible who would need this relief funding. So when it comes to TV series and TV formats, we are willing to accept applications and fund applications for pilots, as indicated there, production TV pilots, for both fiction and for non-fiction. So the allocation overall is 118 million, just above, and the target for the jobs for this entire stream is 7,850. So your individual project of that 7,850 should be able to create a minimum of 10 jobs of that 7,850. So these are the tiers that we have included, the capped funding, which are matched with tiers that indicated before. For PESP 4, we are reverting to capped funding, which is what we do through our normal NFF funding. But this capped funding is purely for PESP 4. You will notice for the capped funding that for most of the formats, they're open to all three tiers. I'll go through the definitions of the tiers just now, but for those of you who are new to NFF tiers, when it comes to production, but for most of them, by and large, the majority of them, they're open to all tiers. With the exception of the production feature film, it's only tiers 1 and 2. And that's purely because of the fact that we, as this is a job creation process program, that's the focus. We really need the type of expertise that have, we'll go through the tiers before, done enough of these to be able to implement in that duration, right? To be able to implement within those strict timelines and deliver on the jobs that they have requested. Unfortunately, there just is not going to be enough time for someone who would be doing a production feature film essentially for the first time, because tier 3 is anyone really who's created created a complete short film. So we're really only focusing on people who have had experience in doing this before, just to make sure that they can meet the job creation target within the 12 months. And then for post-production, feature films, which are fiction, post-production, non-fiction feature films, the eligibility for this will not include an individual who has received production funding from PSP before. We are trying to avoid a situation where an individual year on year gets to complete their project purely through PSP. We really have to make sure that this funding is allocated to as many people as possible, and is not necessarily, it doesn't come across as in such a way where it's being ring fenced for a particular amount of group of people. And we really have to spread it by and large, and as fairly as possible to as many people as possible. So just in terms of the tiers, these are the 3 tiers that we have. Tier 1 is experienced filmmakers who have a previous proven track record of developing and or producing at least 3 successful and commercially viable feature films, series, TV films, or documentaries. Tier 2 are filmmakers with limited experience. They must have developed and produced 1 or 2 feature films, TV films, TV series, documentaries, or 2 to 3 short films and commercials, right? Tier 3, new entrants into the industry, particularly recent film school graduates from disadvantaged backgrounds. They must have produced or directed at least 1 short feature film. So tier 3, 1 short feature film complete. Tier 2, 2 or 3 short films and or commercials, or 1 or 2 feature films. And then tier 1 is at least 3 successful and commercially viable feature films. So in terms of the requirements for the production open call, all of these requirements are stipulated on the actual call. If you go to the NFF website, you will see them all stipulated there. This is just an overview of the vast majority of them: the proposal synopsis, the project summary, the treatment, the detailed budget plan, the finance plan, the marketing and distribution strategy. These are all things that need to be composite of the application. We really implore you, especially if you're applying for the first time for whatever many of the formats you want to apply for Stream 1, to really go through this list and make sure that you include absolutely everything in your production, in your application. Our call opened on the 6th of April. It closes on the 28th of April. The sooner you complete your application and not just register it, but actually submit a full, complete application, the sooner you will have an opportunity to connect with our trusted team from our support team, who will be able to help you with anything that may be outstanding through your application. So once you've fully submitted your application, our support team goes through all of the applications that have been submitted on a frequent basis to just check if there's anything that is outstanding that hasn't been submitted, and once and when they see that there's perhaps some of the requirements that are missing, they are in contact with the beneficiaries that have not fully submitted anything. I implore you to be proactive about it, and once you've completed your submission, you contact the team. and you request that they just double check. You give them your project number. You request that they just double check your application to make sure that you absolutely filled in and submitted everything. And you do it now sooner than later, before the call is closed, so that they can help you with that. You can fill in the gaps and submit anything that hasn't been submitted. If you leave it to the last minute, it becomes virtually impossible for the team to assist. And when I mean the last minute, I don't mean the 28th of April at 5 o'clock or just before 5. I literally mean even a couple of days before that. The volumes of the influx of the applications really increase in number. So it's better for you to shoot while it's still early and make sure that you have peace of mind, to the extent that you've submitted everything. Someone on the other side has helped you check that everything that you submitted that's required is there, and everything that is required to be compliant in a certain way is also there, be it an ID document, a tax PIN certificate, all of those particulars. So do go to the NFF website to make sure, and the Praxis portal, to just read through the all of the requirements here. The second stream is the training open call. These projects focus on training that is preference will be given to training that's targeting scarce skills in the industry, as well as training that is aimed at youth, people with disabilities, and female filmmakers. And for this training, we will be training individuals who are provisionally and fully accredited training service providers. Minimum 10 jobs with a period of 6 months for you to implement your training program, and they must be realistically implementable between the 1st of September 2023 and the 29th of February 2024. The allocation for this stream is 21 million, just above 21 million, and the targeted number of jobs is 2,000. So your project needs to meet, when you submit it, minimum of 10 jobs, which will be composite of that full 2,000. The caps that we've included for the training programs: if you have a program without production equipment for hire, it will be 700,000. If you will include production equipment for hire, we've capped it at 1 million. And we've indicated production equipment for hire because those are the projects that we will be recommend, or the panel will be recommending for approval. Please avoid a situation of submitting an application where it is very clear that you are purchasing heavy production equipment through your Stream 2 project, and then you're including a layer of training or skills development or mentorship over that, right? And then presenting it as a Stream 2 application. The problem with that is that you bloat out your budget quite a lot, and it becomes very difficult for the panel to really get an indication of the authenticity of that application as an application that's focused on training versus an application that's really trying to squeeze in the purchase of equipment in the application. So what we will cover is production equipment for hire. There are things that are tools for trade, like iPads or whatever, that we recognize as tools for trade, which are not necessarily, we're not really talking about those here. But this capping is also really just there to assist you in creating a budget that you as an applicant could speak to quite confidently, and that would make sense to an advisory panel member reviewing your project. So training without production equipment for hire, 700,000. Training with production equipment for hire, 1 million. Then there are stipends that we have included. Each learner per day, a minimum of 350 Rand. Each learner per month, a minimum of 5,000 per month, depending on how you want to create your, how you envision your training program to be implementable. We've given those two options of the stipend per day, the minimum stipend per day, and the minimum stipend per month. These are just some of the requirements of the call that are required. Everything is there on the call through our online portal, which we'll go through now, and also on our website. The same applies to Stream 1, as I'd said, in terms of making sure that you have everything that is required to submit, and everything that is needs to be compliant is compliant and above board, and you reaching out to the team sooner than later. This third stream is the marketing and distribution call. So the projects we consider here are film festivals, markets, and public screenings that are targeting job creation. For anyone who's applied to the NFF under the stream before, you'd notice that we tend to fund things like film festival and markets attendance, and normal marketing and distribution funding, so for collateral and things like that. But we're really not focusing on that here, because those two things, the attendance and just your normal funding, they don't really create a sufficient number of jobs. Remember, PSP is about job creation. So we're focusing essentially on events that, film events, right? So film festivals, film markets, public screenings. They must be able to create, again, a minimum of 10 jobs within a period of 6 months. And again, they need to be implementable between the 1st of September and the 29th of February. So for those of you who might want to do a film festival or a public screening or a couple of public screenings over the festive period, it gives you enough time to plan and market and implement, those types of things. So the budget application allocation there is 12 million. The jobs is 1,000. A lot of the common questions, I know we'll come to the question section now, is the difference between a screening and a film festival. So a public screening really is everything that is a screening, is a drive-in. One screening of a film is deemed a screening, right? A film festival is rather something that happens over a course of time, and a film screening happens over a course of time, and you need to have master classes during film screening. You need to have has to happen over a period of 4 days. So it's quite different to a public screening in that there's a minimum number of 4 days you have to meet. You have to have master classes throughout the film festival, whereas a public screening is a bit more of a low-hanging fruit for someone who's new to this process, because it only the screening of one film then is deemed a public screening. So the cap for film festivals and markets is 1.5 million, and we've tiered it across 3 tiers: tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. I'll go through the tiers just now. For public screenings, it is 500,000. We've focused on tier 2 and tier 3, and we focused on tier 2 and tier 3 because we really want to get as many people who are relatively new into this industry, particularly Stream 3, to utilize the public screening format to really get their feet wet when it comes to implementing these types of things. Sometimes a film festival, even though it's open to tier 3 as well, it might be too daunting and too overwhelming for someone who needs to do this for the first time, particularly in an underserviced province or whatever the case may be. So we're really trying to focus that funding there on tier 2 and tier 3 and give as many people as possible, particularly from underserviced provinces, to get their feet wet and get themselves into the process and into the culture of implementing these types of film events. So in terms of the streams, tier 1 are established film festivals and markets. A festival or market in this tier should ideally have been in operation for more than 10 years and be able to show that they attract funding from multiple sources. Tier 2 is intermediate film festivals, markets, and screenings that have been in operation for more than 5 years and fewer than 10 years. Tier 3, emerging film festivals, markets, and screenings that have been in operation for fewer than 5 years. Again, these are the core requirements. Same thing that applies to Stream 1 and 2. Make sure that you go through everything. If there are any questions that you have, ask the questions that you have to make sure that you submit the type of application that is compliant and that is above board, and you do that before the call closes. If you submit your application on the 27th of April, and you have all the confidence in the world that everything is compliant. Unfortunately, on the 29th of April, even if it's on the 28th of April at 6 p.m. after the 5 p.m. deadline, you will not have an opportunity to ask someone to check if it's compliant or if it's, if there's something missing. Please utilize this time now that you have leading up to the closing date of the call to make sure that you close any gaps if there are any gaps with your application. So again, that's the duration of the call. It opens on the 6th of April. It closes on the 28th of April at 5 p.m. on the dot. I think those of you who are used to applying for funding through the NFF are used to calls being extended. This call will not be extended. I repeat, this call will not be extended. We absolutely can't with the timelines that we have. So we really hope that you take this timeline seriously and you submit before the 28th of April at 5 p.m. And honestly, if I were you, I would even keep the 28th of April out of my mind and really just give myself a target of a week, because you do not want to be applying at a time where you apply last minute and you really want someone to check. It's just not going to be possible with the influx and the amount of applications. So rather apply sooner than later. This is just an overview again of the budget that I'd spoken to earlier and how it's broken up within the various 3 streams. This is the application process. So you'll go, to nff.co.za. Our website, at the very top, there is a long rectangular icon that says Online Funding Application Portal. That is the icon that you click on. All of our funding is done online. We don't accept any applications that are manual. You will register your name, your surname, and then once you've completed your registration process, you will be able to log in and complete your application by selecting any stream that you want to apply for, be it stream 1, stream 2, stream 3. Once you've done that process, this again is just the registration of your actual project. Once you've done the registration of your project, you are given a project number. That project number then will indicate to you that you have successfully been registered. Then you have the opportunity to complete your full application. So through your application, you'll see at the top of the tab there in the gray rectangular tab at the top, there's the first one is the application details, the second one is your company details, the filming details, the budget, and any uploads that you have to include. So you have to complete all of those 5 indicators at the top. We'll go through a video just now at the end, but you have to include the information required through all of those. Once you've completed that process, then you are still at liberty, especially now that there's time, to contact the team and say to them, guys, can you just help me check? This is my project number. Can you just help me check that I have uploaded everything that I'm supposed to upload, that the things that are meant to be compliant are compliant. So again, through the uploads, this is the compulsory documentation that's going to be required, right? Everything related to your tax, your IDs, the comprehensive CVs, the budgets, CVs of personnel for the companies that you're applying with. So these are the things that are going to be required. They're all there on Praxis. And just make sure that everything that is required to be eligible and valid is eligible and valid. Give the people what they want. If this is what the NFF wants, give them what they want. Just take the time to do it, because you will not regret it in the end, especially if your application is compliant. Once you have a compliant application, then that application then stands a chance of being reviewed by advisory panel members. You don't give yourself that chance of your application being reviewed if it's not compliant. For any queries on your application process, you can email support@africanglobalacademy.co.za. There's also PESP@nfef.co.za that you can contact. But if you've submitted your application, you've completed, so you've done the registration process, you've completed the application process in full by uploading and indicating everything you're supposed to include, then you can email support@africanglobalacademy.co.za, request them to just give them the project number, request them to just double check that everything that you have um, um, uh, included in your application is compliant and that you haven't missed anything out. They'll get back to you and tell you to, your your CV is or your tax pin certificate, their compliance issues with whatever they may be, and you'll have the opportunity to fix that, right? So please do that and take the time to, don't think you have a lot of time, because then it will be the 26th or the 27th when you start the process, whereas you could have taken the time to do it this weekend and really, really get it out the way. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to applying for PSP advisory panel members. But before I even go into that, I just want to mention one thing. When you are submitting your application and you're completing the process in your application, before you would have saved throughout all the process when you're going through all of those 5 tabs that I spoke about. Just make sure that the number of jobs that you indicate on the actual Praxis portal match the number of jobs that you have indicated throughout any of your uploads, right? Please make sure you do that, because a lot of the times there is a disconnect. So you might, in your uploads, might have included 35 jobs, but on the actual Praxis portal, you've included 25. Through our processes, we have to include whatever is indicated on Praxis. So make sure that those numbers align. So don't undervalue your project by including 25 when your uploads actually indicate that create 35 jobs. The second thing I want to mention is that when it comes to the budgets that you put together, just remember that any individual that you are paying, be it through a stipend or a salary or however you're going to indicate the cost of them on your budget, whoever you are paying as part of your project is a job. So don't think purely. So for example, if you're applying for Stream 2, don't indicate the jobs purely as the learners that you're going to give stipends, right? The people that are working in the office and the administration, any drivers that you might have, any anyone who you have to pay as part of this project is a job. So whoever you have budgeted for and on your budget, you have to include that as a job. So you would include the number of the learners that you are giving a stipend, and then you would add anyone else who has costed you an amount that you've reflected on your budget. Please make sure that you do that, because when you only include one element, for example, the individuals that you're going to be paying a stipend, you're undervaluing the weight of your project, right? You're undervaluing the amount of jobs that you actually are creating. So please be mindful of that. Whoever you're paying is a job. Okay, so PSP for advisory panel members, there is another call that we have opened for individuals to be advisory panel members. So in a nutshell, advisory panel members have the statutory role of advising and recommending projects for PSP grant based on the merits of the application received. So they will advise on matters relating to the 3 funding streams, be it production, skills development, marketing, and distribution. So we are looking for individuals who have achieved a distinction or have any special knowledge or experience in the fields of production, skills development, marketing, and distribution. In essence, advisory panel members, to be as colloquial as I can, are basically judges, right, of the projects that will be submitted, of the applications that will be submitted. These are the people that will get allocated projects based on their experience. And these are the people that will have sufficient time to go through the projects, to evaluate everything, your project synopsis, your budget, your audience development strategy, your marketing and distribution strategy. They'll go into the Praxis portal and they will input their scores, how much they would score this project, and also the comments that they've given for the project, right? Advisory panel member then would convene through a meeting, will host meetings for Stream 1, host meetings for Stream 2, host meetings for Stream 3, where they will discuss their scores per project when we go through all of the projects. And all of those meetings are chaired by individuals from our council, from our board. So that really is the full role of the advisory panel member. It's really to look at all of the projects that have been submitted, do a proper analytical review of the projects, having gone through all of the documentation that they access through Praxis, and then they come back to in their own time, but within the time frame that they're given as well, to do their scoring of each of the projects and submit very, very accurate and concise comments that they will utilize then through the advisory panel meetings, where they will discuss the projects with each of the other people that have reviewed projects. So on average, for someone who has submitted a project, they will be reviewed on average by 3 different people, 3 different individuals who have the credibility and expertise to review that project. So you've submitted under stream 1, your project will be reviewed by 3 people, 3 advisory panel members, who are advisory panel members for stream 1. And really, that's done in the interest of fairness. It's not really fair for your project to be reviewed by one person. You need to come out with an average score of what your average for your project is, based on the individual scores of the 3 people that have scored you. For stream 1, we're looking for people with a solid understanding of the production and development phases of film and the TV audiovisual sector, proven track record of experience in the sector and or broadcast technology, an understanding of film and audiovisual financing, and also film and audiovisual distribution. So those are key, because as an advisory panel member, you obviously have to be able to interpret the budgets and really make a proper informed decision as to whether the individual who's applying has budgeted accurately, has over budgeted, has bloated budget, has under budgeted. All of these things then definitely make a difference in terms of how that project is. In terms of how that project is interpreted and scored. And then for an advisory panel member, and the understanding of the grant allocation process is advantageous. It's not compulsory, but if you have the understanding of it, then it makes a huge difference also in terms of evaluating if the amount that the person has applied for is fair or not, based on the overall evaluation of the application. And sometimes someone would have applied for the full amount of the cap. You need to be able to have a proper assessment of if that full request of the full amount of the cap is fair. We've indicated the dates that an advisory panel member would be required to participate. So the first part is in the induction process, training of praxis and also ethics training. It will happen from the 1st of June to the 7th of June online. And then the functional evaluation of projects will happen from the 12th of June to the 21st of July. Stream 1 advisory panel members are given a bit more time, because invariably you will be given more projects to evaluate, because for stream 1 we get more projects that submit for funding. And then your advisory panel meetings then would happen between the 31st of July and the 4th of August. So everything will happen online. Obviously, the team will send you links, and that's the process that will happen. So if you are intending on applying, please be mindful of these dates, because these are the dates when you will be required to fully participate for this process. For stream 2, we're looking at individuals who have a solid understanding of the skills development requirements for the sector, a proven track record in education and skills development, and an understanding of financing or skills development programs for the film and video audiovisual sector. Again, the understanding of the grant allocation process is advantageous. And then fully and partially training service provider accreditations will also be advantageous. So these are, again, the dates that will be required. The induction, praxis, and ethics training is the same as stream 1 as it is for stream 3, as you'll see. The functional evaluation for projects, however, this is where things start to differ, where you'll be allocated a time from the 12th of June to the 7th of July. A bit less time, because there will be less projects for you to evaluate. And then streams 2 and 3 advisory panel meetings will happen from the 17th of July until the 24th of July. And then in terms of stream 3, we're looking for individuals that have a solid understanding of the marketing and distribution phases of the sector insofar as they pertain to public screenings, film festivals, and markets. So you could have a solid understanding of marketing alone in the sector, which is fine, but we're really looking for people who have had experience in mounting screenings and film festivals and markets, and who can really speak from experience, just to give the type of solid feedback that is going to be required from those who are applying to implement these projects. That type of experience then obviously helps in terms of the evaluation of the budgeting. So you see there the understanding of the financing. It really gives that type of experience then really gives quality to the type of evaluation that's going to be required for this process. And then a proven track record also in the sector of broadcast technology is also required. So again, understanding of the grant allocation process is advantageous. So these are the dates again which are required. The induction, praxis, and ethics training, 1st of June to the 7th of June 2023. Functional evaluation of projects, 12th of June 2023 to the 7th of July 2023. It's the same as stream 2. And then the stream 2 and 3 advisory panel meetings happen from the 17th of July to the 24th of July. In terms of the appointment and selection of advisory panel members rather, you can apply by, first of all, submitting a letter of nomination. A letter of nomination will clearly describe the candidate's specific expertise and qualifications related to the criteria that I've just mentioned. And then you would also need to include in there your willingness to serve and a brief statement of the nominee's qualifications. In other words, the CV, right? So in other words, to apply to be an advisory panel member, you need to submit a CV. You need to submit a letter of nomination. So a letter of nomination that comes from somebody else nominating you, indicating why you are the right person to be an advisory panel member for this process. And you email that CV and the nomination letter, those two documents, to psp@nfef.co.za. So it's your letter of nomination written by someone else and your CV that are emailed to PESP@nfef.co.za, not applications at nfef.co.za. You send something to applications that's PSP related, no one's going to see it. You have to send it to PESP@nfef.co.za. The closing date for that is the 28th of April. So we opened the call on the 11th of April. You email your CV, you email your letter of nomination to PESP@nfef.co.za. That call closes on the 28th of April at 5 p.m. So before we go into the questions, what I will do is we will do a bit of a recap of the funding process through Praxis, and we'll do that through we're just going to show you guys a video now for those of you particularly who are new to the Praxis process, and that video will just take you through how to apply through our online funding portal, which is found on the NFVF website. So I'm just going to wait for the team to upload the video. There we go. And then we'll have questions.
Register now. That's where I'm clicking. Then when you click there, it will show you the registration box, which requires you to put in your first name, your surname, your email address. You put in your email address again, and then you complete the simple sum that is there, and then you click register. Once you've registered, the system will send you your login details, which is your username and password. Your username is always your email address, and the password will be generated by the system, and you are allowed to change it to make it easy and simpler for you to remember. For those that have already registered, you need to click on the hyperlink here at the bottom where it says click here to log in. Once you do that, it will take me onto my login page where I need to put in my username, which is my email address, as well as my password. And then I click log in. And then it will take me to my home page. For those that haven't registered any applications, you won't have any applications showing on your home screen page. And for those that have registered, this is what you would see. So I've already registered 2 projects already. So for the sake of our demonstration, I'm going to register another project, which is the PESP production. So you can choose any one of these 3 codes that are open, and then you click on the green plus sign to create or register a new application. So I'll click on the first one, which is the production, and then it will take me to the POPI Act page. This is where you need to read and understand this POPI Act, and then once you've done that, you need to accept the terms and conditions by ticking on this box, and then you click proceed. Once you have done that, it will take you to the registration page. On the registration page, you are required to download the PSP funding guidelines. Without downloading them, you won't be able to register your application. It will tell you that it is mandatory to download the funding guidelines. I'll click on the hyperlink for the guidelines. It will open on a new tab, and then you can read and understand. Once you have done that, you can always come back to your registration page. So you can start completing in the details of your application. You need to put in your organization name. I'll put in Red Hat, and then you need to put in your project title. I'll just put in big, and you need to choose your tier levels. You choose tier level 1, it will require you to have at least 3 successful commercial viable feature films that you would have produced. If you choose tier 2, it will allow you, you should be in a position to have at least 2 feature films that you would have or produced. If you choose tier level 3, then you don't have to put in any of that information. So for the sake of our registration process, I'm going to choose tier 2 and put in my film name. I'll put in the release date. I'll put in the name of the distributor, and then I'll go and put in the second one. I'll put in the release date, and then I'll put in the distributor. You need to choose your super sector, production, and then your sector as well, whether it is a short film or an animation documentary. I'll choose fiction, and then you need to choose the province. I'll choose Northwest. You need to choose the designation of the applicant, whether you're a producer, an editor, or director. I'll just pick director, and then I'll click register application. And my application has been registered, and you receive an email with your project number in your email account, and then you click continue. Once you've done that, you go on to the application form. So here is my applicant details, and because I already exist in the system, it keeps my applicant contact details here. If anything has changed, especially maybe if your surname has changed, you need to let us know so we can change it for you from the back. Otherwise, everything will remain as is. You need to, and you can see here that there is age. For those that have applied probably some 2-3 years ago, it will still have the old age that you have used to apply probably when you are 44. So 2 years later, it will still show 44 here. So to change that age, you need to delete the date of birth here. When you delete it, you save. Once you have saved, the age goes away. And then you need to put in your date of birth again so that it can pick up the new age. And then you save. That's how you can change your age. And then you need to complete all the fields that have got the red stars. They are mandatory for you to proceed to the next tab. You need to put in your next of kin in case you're not available. If any VF needs to contact you, they should be able to contact the next person in line. If this one is not available, they should be able to contact the second next person in line or the second next of kin. So you need to put in their details here, and then you save continuously as you keep completing your forms. Once you're done that, you move on to the next tab, which is our company details tab. You put in all the required fields, and then we go down to the bottom. Here we are supposed to upload at least 10 jobs, or you're supposed to list at least 10 jobs for you to be able to proceed or to submit your application form. So we can choose for permanent jobs. The job spec, we've chosen camera and lighting, and then you choose the gender, you choose the race, you choose the number of people that are going to be employed doing this. If you've got 5, the number of disabled, you've got 0, you add. Once you add, that job number or those job numbers will be recorded in the system. You need to do the same for the next spec of job or the type of job, and then the spec again, you can put in maybe boom operator. You choose male, you can choose the race, you choose the number of people to be employed, you choose the number of disabled if they are there, and then you add. So you have to keep repeating the process for all the jobs that you are going to add. And remember, you won't be able to submit until your application form has at least 10 jobs that are going to be created. Here I have 8, and I won't be able to submit until I have at least 10. Once we have put in at least 10 jobs, you can move in to the next tab, which is our filming. And here we need to put in the genre. You choose the proposed shooting format. You put in the information required here. You save. You go on to the next tab, onto the budget. You answer all the questions that you are required to answer. You put in the requested amount. You save. You go on to the uploads tab. On the uploads tab, you need to make sure that all the documents that you're going to be uploading are in this format or this type. Any documents in this format you will not be, which are not in this format, you won't be able to upload and submit. And bear in mind that our maximum file size is 30 megabytes. Anything above this, you won't be able to upload and submit. And to upload, you just need to choose your file, and you go on and you click which file you want to upload. Once it is there, you put upload. If you've seen that you've put in the wrong file or the wrong document, you can always delete using this delete hyperlink here to delete your document. I'm going to do that, and then it goes away. So this is how you delete. Once you're done, you need to click validate to see if you've completed. So this will show me that my application is still very, very empty. So I need to complete it. Once you have done that, you click on your terms and conditions. You accept them, and then you click accept, and then you have accepted, and then you can submit. But I won't be able to submit because I still haven't completed my application form. So once it is completed, then that is when I will be able to submit. And that is how you can complete your production application form. I would like to take you back to the home page so we can go into the marketing form. The marketing is done the same way as the production, but it has a budget tab. So I would like to show you how you put in your budget items. I would put in venue hiring, the applicant's cash contribution. If you are going to be contributing any cash, let's just say I'll put in 1,000, and you're supposed to put or required to put in the amount that you're going to be requesting from NVF that is going to be falling under the budget category of venue hiring. Let's say I would require NVF to sponsor me 50,000. You need to put in 50,000. Please bear in mind that you should not put in space commas when you're putting in your amount. Otherwise, it won't save. Once you have done that, you click save. Once you have saved, you can just scroll down to the bottom. The system will automatically calculate for you. So I'll put in 2 values here so that you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. For admin, my contribution is 25,000, and I'm requesting NVF to fund me 35,000. And then when I save, the system auto calculates for me, and here I have my 85,000 and my own contribution of 26,000. So this is how you complete your application forms. I will go back again to the skills and training because this one is different from the 2. I'll click here to register. The same process again comes in for the POPI Act. I accept my terms and conditions. I proceed. And here, if you can see now on our registration page, it's different because this one doesn't show the tier levels because they are not required under skills and training. But before we can go ahead, we need to download our funding guidelines, just as we did when we filled in the production form. Once you've downloaded our funding guidelines, we can go back to the registration page. We can put in the title of the project. I'll put in youth empowerment, the name of the organization. I'll put Purple Heart Foundation. In which province will the training take place? I'll choose my province. I'll put Free State, and then I'll register my application. And then it will give me an application number, a project number, and then I continue, and here I am into my new application for the skills training provider. So this is how you complete, or you register yourself and you complete the application form on the system. I hope it was clear. Thank you very much for listening. Good day.
So I hope that most of you who got a chance to watch that video got as much insight as you can into, applying through our funding portal. We only accept applications done online. So any manual application, unfortunately, there'll be no one at the office to receive it. So it's very important. Even if you didn't catch all of it, you can always rewind. Once this live stream, we're going to still keep it on our YouTube page. You can always go back and look at that. So I do want to introduce 2 of my colleagues now on the call or on the live stream on the webinar. who will assist with the Q&A that we're going to do now. We've seen a lot of your questions in the comments, so we're just going to do as many as we possibly can. I would like to introduce Yolanda Ngogotwana, who is our Head of Industry Development, and also the CEO from our support company, African Global Skills Academy, Miss Onika, who is also going to be joining us. So Yolanda and Onika will be joining us on the call, and we will take you through some of the questions that we have. Okay, so I'm just going through the questions as I see them here. So from EMS Productions, South Africa, can you apply for more than one component, example, production and post-production? So you can apply for one thing per stream. You can apply for stream 1, stream 2, and stream 3, right? You can apply once in each stream, but you can only apply once in a stream. So, if you submit the application that you're most confident in, right? That you need the most at the time. So apply either for production or apply for post-production. Remember, we need to give this as relief funding to as many people as possible. So it's important for you to keep that in mind. So only one thing you can apply for per stream. Why is from Lola Akins? Why is feature film animation 1.5 million, but live action feature is 3 million? Animation by far is way more expensive. It should be the same as live action feature, if not even higher. I'm going to let Yolanda speak to this one. Just unmute.
Hi. Afternoon, everybody. I think in terms of just the projects that we've looked at what we are able to fund just across the board. And if you look at the features for 3 million, they only open up to tier 1 and tier 2, whereas the animation ones are open to up to tier 3. And also when it comes to animation, we don't fund the full films. We fund with an understanding that they will not be able to complete. So it is really doing more of the development work for the animation.
Okay. So you're saying someone is automatically disqualified if they've received PSP funding before? No.
Oh.
Yeah, no. So I think, sorry, Yolanda, I think the point that I've made before is it's just around the production and post-production element. So if you had received production funding under PSP before, this post-production funding, you're not eligible for it, right? We really, Ms. Akins, we're trying to make sure that we allocate this funding to as many people as possible, and not find ourselves in a situation where year on year, PSP on PSP, people are being able to get funding consistently, and there's not necessarily that type of funding that's the circle isn't open for other people. So you're more than welcome to apply for something else, but not necessarily. But there is just as that clear demarcation as to what you won't be eligible for. Okay, so from Kupedi Apani, it's not so much a question. It's just him saying that the NFVF has said that he's never attached a tax clearance, which is not true. So I think these are some of the things that you can deal with directly with the team. I'm not sure if it's PSP related, if it's NFVF related. So if it's PSP related through that type of a program, please email psp@nfvf.co.za. If it's related through normal NFVF funding, please email applications@nfvf.co.za with that particular project that you are referring to. From Pablo, could you develop a bit more what is considered a public screening. Okay, so a public screening is essentially anything. If you screen a film in a public area, right? So it can be through a park, it can be through a school hall, a community hall, anywhere that's inside or outside where people can come together and convene and watch the screen. So you would project it on a huge projector. They have blow-up projectors, they have traditional projectors. People come and they view the film that you are screening. It's essentially a cinema experience that is not done in a typical cinema environment. So exactly when you would walk into Ster-Kinekor and view a film, that's exactly what a public screening is. It's just not going to be in Ster-Kinekor, New Metro, or Cine Center. It's in an outside area. So one screening is deemed a public screening, right? So the screening of one film. So that's essentially what a public screening is. So you can do it as a drive-in, where people drive in with their cars and they they watch from the comfort of their cars, or you can do it outside where people picnic, or it's up to you in the way in which you want to implement that. All the information though is on the website. Are individuals allowed to apply for production funding without a company? I'm going to let Yolanda respond to this. Are companies allowed to apply for production funding without a company?
Yes, in particular for PSP, they are allowed to apply without a company. I do think, however, in terms of when it comes to the production funding for the larger amount, they will be expected to create a separate account for the PSP so that the funding is then not muddled up with your own personal finances. And then, of course, the funding will have to then be audited like any other funding. So for the purposes of the PSP, they can, but with a separate account.
Since Tier 2 can apply for feature production funding up to 3 million, should they include a mentor?
This very depends on the company, right? On the size of the company, because if the Tier 2 varies, you've got Tier 2 who are at the top end of Tier 2, meaning that they do have the experience, they have made features before, and then you may have a Tier 2 maybe who's made one feature, and then maybe they're making a different genre from what they've made before, and they might need their assistant. So I think it really will depend on the needs of the filmmakers. And I think the other way that the mentor may come about is also if the project is read by the panelists and they feel that the team that has been suggested would do with someone who's more experienced, then a mentor would also then be suggested in that regard. So it really varies, but look at your strength. And then, because also a mentor can be someone from directing, it could be a supervising producer, or it really could be someone who's assisting with story. And somebody is saying,
okay, go for it.
Can I apply as a panelist, and can I also apply for production funding? Yes, you can apply for both, because at this point we don't know which one you're going to be chosen for. But in the case where you do, your project does actually minimum compliance requirement, you then cannot be reading for the stream that you have applied for. If you're applying for production, you can't then read for that production. You have to be reading for another stream. I think right about now the panelist application is for all 3 streams, so you can then apply for the one that you think your skill set is best served at, but then you will not be able to read in the stream that you are funded at. And this is just to ensure that the process is as fair and as open as possible without necessarily making it or making anyone feel unfair or treated unfairly.
Can you please explain from Lorato, can you please explain what marketing and distribution should look like or is for Stream 1 as part of the things that need to be submitted?
I think when you look at all the projects that are being asked for in Stream 1, it is projects that are for production. And therefore, when you're making your projects for production, you should have an outlet of where you are intending the project to go to, whether it be a festival or it be you're already working with a distributor or a broadcast, and therefore your marketing and distribution plan for that film should speak to that. So if you are, for instance, making a short film which you are intending to distribute within your community, and you know who exactly you're making it for, your distribution plan and your marketing plan is really to say that this film that I'm making, this is how it's going to reach the audiences, because we do not want you to just make a film for the purposes of making a film. Yes, this is the PSP. We are prioritizing job, but I think as an industry, we're also coming back and making more films. And I think we're not just going to make films for the sake of it. So for the films, you do need to know who are the audiences, where am I going to find the audiences, and the marketing really speaks to how do you get those audiences, and then the distribution really also is the same thing. So I think across the board for features and for shorts, I think it is an expectation. Hopefully I've explained that to its fullest.
Can someone submit 2 applications in one stream, as in fiction and non-fiction for one stream? So I think we've responded to this. Per stream, it needs to be 1 application. This is a special project, it's relief funding, so it has to be 1. So you would have to choose between the fiction and the non-fiction project.
Yeah, and also because because the money is from the same production funding, so either way, if you had applied for 1, you would only be accepted. I mean, if you had applied for 2, you'd only be accepted for 1.
Yeah. Can Stream 3 be used to screen impact or educational documentaries to communities that might not otherwise have access to them? Absolutely. In your film festival or your screening, the content that you screen, you'd need an FPB certificate for that, obviously, to make sure that it is above board. But the content that you screen would really be up to you in terms of your full application.
The difference between, I think, a proposed budget and detailed budget, the two overlap, because really a proposed budget is how much you are intending to have your film made for. And this, if you are applying for money that is more than what the cap is, you then need to have a finance plan that shows us where you're going to get. For instance, if you're applying for a feature which is 10 million and the cap is only 3 million at the NAVF for this particular call, you then need to have a finance plan that shows us exactly where you're going to get the rest of the 7 million, and also within the timeline, because it also still has to speak to the timelines that we do have. So if you have a finance plan and you're getting some other money from private investors, we do need the confirmation that those private investors are already on board, and this is to ensure that the projects are done within the timelines, and therefore, if you do not have prospect of other funding, I would say stick to the project that can be made within the caps. And then just in terms of the budget, it being detailed, I think we do need a detailed budget, just to be able to see exactly what the cost entails. So we really do not prefer a summarized budget in any way, because then it becomes hard to assess one project to the other if one project has a detailed budget and then the other one just has a summary budget. So I think the two are intertwined. But for those who then have projects that exceed our cap, you do need to provide a finance plan. And in the case where you don't provide a finance plan, you might not be disqualified, but you will disadvantage your project. So I would suggest that you just add both.
Can you apply for more than one stream? Yes, you can. You can apply once per stream, but you will only be approved for one of the projects. So you can shoot your shot in all of the 3 streams, but we will not be able to give you funding for all 3 streams and all 3 projects, or even 2. It will only be 1. We have to make this funding stretch as far and wide as we possibly can.
Yeah. There was also another question that came through the chat on our side asking, I'm currently making a Xitsonga Film Festival hosting, and can I do that? I'm just summarizing your question. I think in terms of the film festivals, you can make your film festival in any language, and it can be in any part of South Africa, from rural areas to to suburban areas. So we're really not deciding where your film festival can be or what the focus of your film festival. So you can make a film festival that is focused on queer films and the queer community, and that is still fine, versus also making a film festival really surround or centered around children and schools.
We teach creators from all sectors content creation. We also provide free complimentary online marketing startup packages. We already did 3 KZN district programs. Are we eligible for stream 2? So I mean, I think it's quite clear that you are already in the training space. I think the important thing to realize is that everything is going to be dependent on the application that you put through, right? We are quite clear to say that we are looking for applications from partially accredited or fully accredited training service providers. So if you can give us any type of an indication that that accreditation, partial or fully, is there, right, within the context of what you're doing as it's related to the audiovisual sector, then it will, then the project will be evaluated on its merits. So just make sure that the project, it's okay to say what you've done before, but the panel evaluates what you are actually submitting that needs funding within the set period that we're giving you, that you'll have to implement the project now. So I don't know if Yolanda wanted to come in there.
No, I think you've covered everything, and I think it's just in terms of the question that is on the screen. Can I please ask the applicant to please just email NAVF, what is it, PSP at navf.co.za. You can copy Onika in terms of just asking that request, so that you can then at least be given feedback in terms of what was the issue with your last application. Unfortunately, for the PSP, because it is a special fund, we do not have a surplus fund to deal with appeals. That's just one of the unfortunate part about this funding as it is right now. I think there's also another funding that comes from, I think we will leave our email addresses just in case you feel like you didn't get Onika's email address there. There's another question here asking, can I apply for different components of the production, for instance, production and post-production? I think if you are applying for production, ordinarily your production funding or your production budget should include post-production. So for the purposes of this call and even NAVF funding, you only apply to the NAVF for post-production if your production funding was funded elsewhere. So the idea for post-production is to be able to say you funded your project on your own, you've come thus far, and then you are now needing to complete it, and therefore we create the post-production funding for those type of people. But you can't now, if you've applied for production funding in PSP2 or PSP1 or PSP3, you can't then come back to us for the same project and apply for post-production, because then that would just read as double dipping in our funding. And yes, the call is recorded, or the webinar is recorded for the person asking.
Okay. Yolanda, can I just emphasize the issue around the jobs in general, because this is very, very critical. And Onke has already mentioned it. If you are putting your jobs on Praxis system as different number, and you are putting, uploading a document with a different number on jobs, it will count against you. So the number of jobs that you put on the Praxis system must be in line with the number of jobs that you are uploading on the system. And a lot of the people in PESP3 were caught up with this issue that on the Praxis, they would say they're only creating 5 jobs. And then they would upload a document and say, we are creating 15. But remember, when we do compliance and we move projects from the first part of the evaluation, we are not reading the documentation. The documentation is read by the panel. So it's important that the alignment is there between what you are putting on praxis and what you are putting for the panel to read later. And I hope that clarifies the issues of the minimum 10 jobs. Thank you.
Okay. So the question about applying for more than one stream keeps on coming up. So you can apply once in every single stream, right? You can apply once in stream 1, you can apply in stream 2, you can apply in stream 3. If you apply more than once in a stream, it's not possible for us to fund you more than once in that stream, right? So you can apply in all of the 3 streams. We will fund you for one of the projects, right, that you've applied for. Well, if the projects are compliant, if the recommendation is to fund, you can only be awarded grant funding for one of those projects of the 3 streams. If you apply for funding twice in one stream, the same applies. You can only be awarded for funding once in the stream. I think Yolanda explained the element around the production and the post-production, to say that if there's queries in your mind around the post-production element, you can basically make sure that you apply for that under the production. But you have to just realize the fact that we will only fund you for once. We will only fund you once, depending on how many times you apply. So even if the both of the applications are compliant and above board, they're both quality applications, we are not in a position to award the funding twice to one person for one stream, to award the funding more than once to a person in different streams.
Yeah. And the question, I think the one that's being posed right now is to say, does that mean I automatically get disqualified if I had already received funding before for PSP? I think what we are saying is that we are prioritizing, because I think PSP, as you will know, is a special project, and this is its third installation, and we would not have it in a case where one individual has received PSP in every year when there are individuals who maybe have not received funding at all. But what we are saying is we are going to look at the quality of the proposal and also the jobs that are being proposed on each, and also the impact of the projects. But we will be prioritizing those who have not yet received funding before. Not to say that the ones that have received will not get it, but in terms of just priority. And I think this goes across everything else that we do, is that we do prioritize people with disabilities, we prioritize women, prioritize from people from underserviced communities and provinces. So this prioritization of people who haven't been funded really falls as part of those priorities, but it never really means that someone from Gauteng, for instance, doesn't get funded. I hope I've adequately answered that. What if you have misplaced your ID? Can you submit with a temporary ID? My understanding is that a temporal ID still serves as an ID, but it does need to be certified, of course. And in which case you would have to then send us the updated ID as soon as possible. There is a window in terms of how long you can use a temporal passport ID in South Africa. So you just need to make sure that it's within that window. You can't then continuously have a temporary ID just because you lost an ID. So you then need to show that there's a process that you are actually getting a permanent ID. What is the minimum number of jobs to be trained? I think at this point we do not have a minimum, unless Onika, you can come in here. We do not have a minimum number of people can be trained. I think the minimum number of jobs is 10. But of course, in terms of the project will be looked at. Your proposal, what you're proposing, will be looked at versus the budget. So you then need to make sure that there's congruency between what you are quoting us versus how much you are spending and the people that you are imparting knowledge to. So for instance, you can't then have a training program where you are training 4 people and it's costing us 1,000. But I'll let Anika elaborate on this one.
Thank you, Yolanda. Indeed, in this case, remember your training trainees are the people that we are also counting as jobs. So we are working on a minimum of 10. So in the manner in which you develop your project proposal and implementation plan, you need to make sure that you align, and also remember to align to what Onke referred to as the daily rate that can be paid while you are training those people, because all that will determine how much money you are going to be applying for. So it has to be at least a minimum of 10 trainees if you are going to be accounting for those as jobs.
This one says, hi, for production funding for TV, does it include a talk show or a pilot? A talk show pilot. I think yes. Talk shows, as far as I understand, but it's only because we are not funding production series at the moment, so it's only for a pilot, which is one episode. So in terms of the genres, it can be within the genres that the NAVF funds, but it only is for a pilot because again the focus is within what NAVF is mandated to funding.
When will successful applicants be notified or announced? So we will notify them. So in two ways, we'll send letters on our letterhead, indicating if you've been approved for funding, exactly how much you've been approved for. If you haven't been approved for funding, we will also indicate that in the reasons thereof. We'll also publish it on our website. That will happen before we start the contracting phase with those who have been approved for funding. So once our council meetings have taken place and our council has approved the projects, then we will be in a position to notify everyone who's been approved for funding. And then after that process, we go into the contracting phase, so that, for example, if it is stream 1, by the time you start on the 1st of October, before then you would have been made well aware of the fact that you have been approved for funding, you would have been contracted, you would have a first tranche payment paid, so that you can start implementing by the 1st of October 2023, sorry.
Wendy has a question about training, where she's saying if someone has a lot of experience but not accredited, can that person be used? And remember, facilitators, there is no facilitator accreditation. If you are doing accredited training, the institution is accredited and assessors or moderators are accredited. So in terms of your facilitators, you are looking at people with the right relevant experience and qualifications.
Yeah, and just to be precise in terms of the number of the years, that person does have to have a minimum of 10 years in practice and specializing in that field, your facilitators that you do choose.
Does an audiovisual podcast qualify under the non-fiction web series category? So podcasts are a difficult one. We've had quite a number of discussions around podcasting at the NFVF. Unfortunately, podcasts don't necessarily fall under our ambit as the NFVF in terms of what we do. They don't. So unfortunately, if it is a podcast, it won't necessarily fall under this type of funding for PSP. Your web series then would need to be more based on content on either scripted or unscripted, but not necessarily in a podcast format. That doesn't fall under the banner of what we fund as the NFVF. From Naledi Jessica, do you fund university societies? So look, it would have to depend what type of an organization you are submitting as. Look, they are, if you look at the requirements that we have for funding, they are quite clear in terms of the so far as the company documentation that is required. So it might, once you go through the application process, if there are certain things that are required that a university society, give or take, doesn't necessarily have, then it obviously would jeopardize and compromise your application. We are an entity of government, so if your university society falls under and operates under the government institution of the university, then unfortunately you won't be awarded for funding, because we do not fund government institutions, right? Because we are a government institution, we can't do that. So So it really just depends on how you would be submitting that application, because ultimately throughout the application process, what is required in terms of the documentation is what, you know, they unfortunately there won't be any exceptions made. So you just need to make sure that that documentation is there. If your university society functions in a statutory way under the university is a government institution, then it will be very difficult for you to get through the compliance phase, because we don't fund government. We can't as a government institution.
Someone says,
Now,
what do you
Lady Jessica,
oh,
again, do you require to be reimbursed? Go ahead, Yolanda.
someone says, what do you want from a budget since it's on the uploads? So I think in terms of the uploads, you do need to detail your budget in the upload. And I think also on Praxis, there are questions that ask you about the budget, and you do need to answer those uh, fully. And as Onika has said, we use the Praxis system to be able to tell without necessarily going into the applications. Whereas when the panelists are reading, they do need more details to be able to evaluate your project. So I would advise that do both. I think I wouldn't take anything for granted. We are a team of quite a number of people with different accesses within the system. And the panelists, of course, going through your actual projects, whereas our system administrators are actually ensuring that what goes to the panelists does meet the minimum requirements. So I think fill in the system, and don't say because I've uploaded it, because again, from a time point of view, we do not have the time to open up every upload to ensure that you've actually attached a budget and it is detailed. I think it's some of those things that we can assist each other in. There was a question about, do we require to be reimbursed? I don't know, that question has just left now. I think the PSP is a grant. Do you require to be reimbursed? The PSP is a grant. So there is no reimbursement required for the project. I think the request that government is making is that you create projects that then hire people. It's not necessarily the same as our traditional NAVF funding. I think the only thing that government is asking us to do is be responsible with it.
Okay, I think Vidal was trying to get into the page. Just trying to look at the other questions here on the chat.
Adaya, could you please just send again an email on psp@navf.co.za so we can just look into that? I think if it gave you a challenge, definitely our system administrator will work on it after that. But it's also just the Papaya Act, as well as the call itself. It's just so that you also understand what you are. We require you to read those documents fully, because in a way, if you do not read and you just press on it, you then are acknowledging that you have read. So we then ask that you do read, because something bind you later on, you cannot plead ignorance, just as a general term. Can an unaccredited organization collaborate with an accredited one? Yes, you may. You can. I think you would then apply. Of course, one applicant would have to take the lead, but I think within the application you can then say that is a joint venture. And as we had said, it's for both accredited and not accredited. Of course, with the accredited one, then we have the verification that the program is accredited. But with the non-accredited one, we do require that, again, the facilitators and everyone has at least minimum experience of 10 years within that field. Do NAVF fund culture documentaries like an educational series about culture? I think when it comes to documentaries, there is no genre that is left out. I think the only things that, of course, that we do not fund is it's gaming. I think in terms of what we do not fund, we can definitely, I think for PSP is much more inclusive. So we fund quite a number of things that are children friendly and family friendly. Of course, there are things that we don't fund, but I think most of the things that we do fund, PSP is much more broader. I hope I've answered that. So your film can be funded as a cultural documentary. Production ready. So when we say that the project needs to be production ready, we mean that it has to be ready for production. So within the phases of making a film, there's development, there's concept, where you're developing your concept, and then there's the actual development where you're writing your scripts and making sure that everything is ready for production, that your characters are fully developed, that your story makes sense, and all so forth. And then when we say the project has to be production ready, we mean that you have to be able to go into pre-production as soon as you are given the funding, meaning that we cannot then be going back to saying that we still need to write the characters in. We still need to, so the project needs to be ready to go into production. You cannot start by going back and writing a script. So you have to have a fully written script for production projects, and then for nonfiction you have to have a full treatment that shows that you are ready to go into production. So that's how the team or the panelists will be able to see if the project is ready. And it's not just the story itself, it's also things like budget, schedules, finance. Again, if you are applying for a project that is requiring more money, production ready also means that you do have the finances in order.
Okay, this person's asking when are applications going to open again. Some of us are not well prepared, especially those of us who are new to the industry. So we go according to the instructions that we're given through the Department of Sport, Arts and Culture. When we started PSP3, we were aware of PSP4. We haven't been given any indication about PSP5. So I cannot categorically state that the call for PSP5 will be open next year in April, because we've been given no indication on that. What I can say, though, is that we still have calls that are available through the normal NFVF funding that we release throughout the financial year. So you'd have to also look out for those if you are not confident enough to apply through PSP4.
So this one says, is the production funding strictly for people recreating jobs and not necessarily for equipment hire, editing, and so forth? I mean, I think to be able to make a film, you do need to edit, you do need to have the equipment, cameras, and so forth. So in terms of, yes, this particular call is focused on job creation, but we also understand that you cannot make a film without necessarily having the cameras and having catering and all those things. But we just cannot get to a situation where you have like catering for 200,000 for R1,000,000 film. So it really has to be, and I'm not sure the experience of the person asking this, but I think we do cover equipment, but everything has to make sense. And I would say, if you're not sure about things, check out templates, and check out things like color crew, to check out how much crew costs, for instance. Contact gear companies to find out how much cameras are, so that you are actually giving rates that are realistic, because again, the panelists that will be reading the projects, they are experienced practitioners that do know how much an ordinary camera should cost, or do know, for instance, how long it should take you to at least shoot a feature film. So I think just do the research and make sure that the things that you are putting in your application are things that make sense. And where you're not sure, I would say ask again. I think if you call a gear company, for instance, and you ask them to give you a quote, they would definitely do that. So I think let's utilize the resources and just make sure that things are not bloated in the budget, because then that's where red flags are raised. But I think get somebody to assist you. So I don't know if you want to take this one, Onika or
Yeah,
Onke.
so last year is saying we saw individuals getting approvals in 3 streams using different companies. Is this acceptable? No, it's not acceptable. This was the case of one individual, which we had to deal with, and we had to appraise our council and our board of. It was an oversight on our end, but it was one individual who managed to trick the system like that. But we have had to reinforce a lot of the work that we do, include reinforcements to make sure that it does not happen again. So it was something that happened once during PSP3, and it is not going to happen again because we've implemented something such that it will not be allowed. So it'll be relatively easier for us to avoid that situation again.
For stream one, is purchasing of cameras forbidden? Because I'm meaning to purchase would be more effective in terms of continuity. Yes, purchasing the camera would help you in gaining assets as a filmmaker, but that's not the purposes of the PSP. So unfortunately for this call, you do have to hire an equipment, and I'm not sure what type of project you'd be shooting, but I would say find codes that don't necessarily cost as much as the price of purchasing a camera. But I like, again, purchasing of cameras. I think the only time where things would be allowed for purchasing would be for stream 2, which is again tools of trade depending on the projects, for training materials. But other than that, everything else has to be for equipment. It has to be hired, unfortunately. Yes, they are. VR documentaries considered.
Okay, I see a question here. Do service providers, catering, location, rental, transport also count as jobs created? Yes, they do. Anything you budget for on your budget is a job. So please be mindful of that when putting together, when indicating the amount of jobs you're creating. Like I said, whatever you costed for on your budget, whatever you're going to pay for, as long as there are individuals attached to it, right, then you include that as a job created. From Guliri, can extras, okay. So can extras and cast members fall under the number of people to be employed? Do we write the synopsis of the project's number of jobs or synopsis of the film? The third one is last year we were declined due to company documents not certified. What other documents are needed to be certified? So Yolanda, do you want to just take the first two questions and then Onika can take the third one?
So the one about the synopsis, it has to be the synopsis of the film. I think there is, so within the application there is the mandatory documents, which is your tax clearances, your ID copies, your company registration. Those are mandatory documents. They more compulsory must have. And then there's the creative stuff, which is the script, the synopsis, the outline, the treatment, and then there is then the schedules, and then the budgets, as well as the distribution plans, the list of jobs that you must have. So you must have all of those. But I think for the synopsis, it is the synopsis of the project. Onika, I don't know if you want to speak to the ones around which uploads must be certified.
Okay, thank you. It's important that the company CK documents and the ID are certified. Those are the two documents that we need certified. And a lot of people were caught up with that one as well, because you are not uploading original documents. So the moment you are not uploading original documents, it is a requirement that those two documents are certified. Yeah, so those are those two. What we also found is that the issue of the text pin, remember a text pin, as much as it's a text pin, it's a document that you download. Some people are just writing the number. They take a page and write us the text pin. This is the text pin. Unfortunately, because we are not a supply chain organization, we do not have those authorization to go in and actually use that number to evaluate whether you're compliant or not. So it's important to actually upload the actual document printed from SARS as a text pin. Don't write it by your hand and put it in a page and upload that. That is what I would advise everyone as well. Thank you.
Can extras and cast members fall under the number of jobs to be employed, number of people to be employed? Yes. First question: do we write the synopsis? I think I've answered this one. Is it the same? Last year we were declined. I think we've answered this one. There was a question before that popped up to say, is this open to South African citizens only? Yes, it is. It is open to only South African citizens only. I think in the case of asylum seekers, there is I think they do qualify, but there's a specific criteria. So you would just need to send us before you apply, and then we would check in. And if you do apply, so it is mostly open to South African citizens. It is open to South African citizens. And then there's do you have to demonstrate that you can raise the balance of the finance plan within the 12 months for stream one? Yes, Carolyn, you do have to, because again, the PSP project is an initiative by government. So if those funds are not used within the stipulated timelines, we do have to send them back. We do have to give them back. So I think in the case where we allow you to raise funding nonstop, then we would have to then end up returning that money to government, and that's not what we would like. So again, like we had said, we ask that you come to us when you're production ready, meaning that you do have the rest of the funding confirmed, because the deadline is October 2024 for everything.
There's a question from Ronald Blakis. Do you want the names of people for the job credit list?
Yeah. So for the people that you've confirmed, definitely for your key creative team, we want everyone, I think, and the key creative really includes all your decision makers. For if it's a production project, it would include your editors, your camera, your DOP, your producer, your production manager, line producer. So all your key creatives are required to be there already. Your editors for a production project, and then for and you need to list them. And if there's a key cast, you also need to list them, so that also if in the case of the key cast, we can also see that there's an alignment between what you say they will cost you and what they actually do cost. For stream 2, you definitely again do need to have the names of the key, because it also then forms part of the feasibility assessment of your project. So for stream 2, you definitely need to have the facilitators' names, so that we are able to see if they do have the required experience. You need to have the project managers and so forth. And then for stream 3, you then also need to ensure that you do have the list of films that you will be showing in your festival. You need to ensure that you have the people either that are curating your films for the festival, your project manager, your project lead, the lead of your logistics, and so forth. So all the lead roles we need to ensure that they are there and that their CVs are attached.
So I think that goes into the next question, which will probably be the last one, because we have come to the end of the time that we have. As a company, do we have to have people ready, or should we await to fund them basically once we start the project? So as a company, do we have to have people ready, or should we wait for funding, then we start to employ the specific number of employees, cast and crew? So I think that feeds back to what Yolanda was saying, in the sense that when you do your application, you have to have a full view of exactly what you are intended to implement. but you cannot employ them up until you have gotten a letter of confirmation from us that says, yes, you have been approved for funding to this amount, this is the job expectation, and then you've been contracted by the NFVF and given your 90% first tranche payment. So you have to make sure that you have gotten the right documentation and assurance from the NFVF. Don't fall into the trap that many creatives do when they, upload submit an application, very confident in the quality of the application. You think for sure you're going to get the funding. Maybe you've spoken to a couple of people in the industry or whatever the case is. Up until you have any type of commitment from the NFEF, you cannot be employing anybody. And also whatever you submit in terms of your application, so you might submit right up until the cap for that specific format that you're applying for. You might not get approved for that full amount that you have requested. You might get approved for less. Then the expectation in terms of the number of jobs won't necessarily be what you had said that you could create through your application. It will also change accordingly. So that will obviously change then the number of people that you can employ insofar as it's related to PSP. So you would rather wait until you have a contract that stipulates the amount that you will be funded for from the NFEF before you start employing anybody in your project.
Yeah. Before you go, Anke, I think there's like 3 questions that we can hit back to back. One says, if I have been commissioned by MultiChoice, does that favor me for applying for PSP? Commissions are not an exclusion in this funding. You must remember, commissioned work belongs to the channel that has commissioned it. And therefore, it does not form part of the PSP because that's not your project. And then the second question, so all forms of commissioned work doesn't qualify. And then the second one says, if I have a pending application with the NAVF, does that prejudice me? So in terms of if you have a project that you have applied for the NAVF and you're applying for the same funding, it's either you're applying for, the only time that is allowed is if you are applying for at the NAVF, if let's say your project is, I'm going to use the 3 million rand one. If your project is above 3 million, and at the NAVF you had applied for the difference, you can apply in both. It will not prejudice you. However, at the point where your project from NAVF is not funded, that therefore means from a finance plan you no longer have that that money that you had intended to secure from NAVF. So it does leave your finance plan rather vulnerable. So I think it's a yes, but again, because the NAVF funding for cycle 1 will only come out, I think, in June or end of May. So at the point where we are doing the evaluation, if you have not received that funding from NAVF and you were rejected, it will be excluded from your finance plan. And then the last one says, what kind of company can I apply for or register for? I think if you're still going to register a company, it's like
Time.
Yeah, time. One, we also, because you also then need to get the, I mean, you can register a company and get it in a day, but I think it's also, it has to depend on what you want to do with the project. I would say also the call is really open for people who work on or intending to work within the film industry. You must also remember the President Stimulus Fund is in different genres. There's one for different parts of the industry. NAC is running it, other departments are running it. So I would say look at the one that really speaks to what you are doing. So for the person asking what company they should apply in, if you're only going to create a company for the purposes of PSP and you don't necessarily work in the film industry, I wouldn't advise that you do apply, because again, it will come up in your application. I would say look at the other parts of government and what PSP related funding that they do have, so that you do give yourself the benefit of the doubt of getting the funding.
Ronald again has asked, we do have to wrap up, but I'll just take this question. Can the creative team count as part of the job creation? Absolutely. So anyone who you've costed for on your budget, guys, anyone who you're paying. So make sure that your budget is as clear as possible to see who exactly you are paying to be part of this project, because anyone you are paying to be part of this project is a job. You need to count that person as a job. So if it is part of the creative team, in whatever way they're part of the creative team, you have to clearly indicate that on your budget. So don't say, don't have a budget that just says a line item creative team, and then you have a cost, you haven't quantified that, and you haven't, then you have a cost, allocated towards that. Try be as specific as possible. So when you say creative team, what exactly are you talking about in the creative team in terms of the titles and the designations? You indicate those in terms of the quantity. If you have one or two of each of those designations, you cost them on your budget. So you absolutely can. So I do see that there are some questions that we unfortunately are not going to get to this morning, but we are going to make note of them, and through our support team, then we'll be able to respond to these individual questions that we haven't necessarily had a chance to answer during these 2 hours. We are 3 minutes over the allocated time that we do have, but we do really want to thank you guys for attending. We appreciate all of the questions that you asked, even if some of them were in repetition. You would rather be clear than not be clear. I think there were some things that came out quite consistently. Are you able to apply more than once in a stream? You can apply more than once in a stream. The thing is, you will only be approved for funding once in that stream, right? Can you apply for funding in more than one stream? You can apply for funding in stream 1, you can apply for funding in stream 2, you can apply for funding in stream 3. We will only recommend you for funding for one of those projects that the panel has deemed compliant and above board, right? So there have been other questions related to the budgets, how specific they have to be. Just make sure that you go through all the merits of the call. You literally sit with them and make it a tick box exercise as you are applying. If you want a recap on the video of how to apply through Praxis, you are more than welcome to. This thing will be on our YouTube page, to rewind there and go through those different things on the YouTube panel, on the YouTube page, just to make sure that you're clear as to what the process is. We have not been informed about PSP5, so if you want to make the most of this, these couple of days up until the 28th of April to apply, shoot your best shot. Apply sooner than later. Do not wait for the last minute to apply. You will not, it will be very difficult for you to get any assistance. If you apply now, you're more than welcome to reach the support team and ask them for any questions that are related, or if there are any queries related to PSP, please email psp@nfef.co.za. Thank you so much for attending the session. Thank you very much to Yolanda and to Onika for providing the much needed support in terms of the quality of the responses that you gave for the questions. We wish everyone the best of luck for applying, and we hope to see your applications coming through the Praxis portal for projects. If you want to apply to be an advisory panel member, we hope to see your applications through PESP@nfef.co.za. And you apply with your CV, and you apply also with your nomination letter. Yes, so please just make note of that email, psp@nfef.co.za, not applications@nfef.co.za, not Yolanda's email address or my email address. So, if you may know them, please just respect the means of communication, because we're really trying to make sure that we don't miss anything when it comes to the communications around PSP. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you have a great afternoon further. Thank you.